Hello and welcome back to the Pink Floyd album ranking saga. Today, as you've already read by the title, is going to be my most controversial one yet. Oh boy, I'm so happy. This is episode number 5, and we are at, I think, 11 of 15. So, without further ado, time for me to explain myself. At number 11 on my favorite Pink Floyd albums, our fifth least favorite, whatever, we have The Dark Side of the Moon. And I cannot wait to get into this one because this is going to be a juicy one. So, The Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd's, why are we doing this again? 8th studio album. Yes, 8th. I think. 8th studio album, came out in 1973. Without a doubt, absolutely their most landmark, influential, just earth-shatteringly successful album. I mean, this is like one of the best-selling albums of all time. This is Pink Floyd's top. Objectively, this is their top, just of everything. So why would I have it at number 11 when most people have it at 1? I mean, hell, I think that the three most favorited Pink Floyd albums I see are Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, and Animals, in that order. Maybe flip Animals and Wish You Were Here. But everyone loves this album. I love this album. This album is a masterpiece. I mean, you see this, okay, don't mind that. The record is in good shape, but this cover is not. I got it for cheap. This cover photo, this picture, I mean, this is iconic. In case you're younger and you've never seen what this looks like, again, I told you this one's in rough shape, but opens like this, and on the inside it looks like this. It's got like sort of a heartbeat, got the lyrics, got the track listing, and then normally yours wouldn't be split, but then you have the record. So 10 tracks, 5 on each side. A fair bit of it written by Waters, fair bit, but not a ton. There's the album, but so let's talk about it. Why is this my number 11 if it's so good? Just to talk about it. So the thing I think that is one of the coolest things about this album is just how good the songs flow. I mean, 10 songs. Every song on this album flows into one another. The only songs that don't are The Great Gig in the Sky, which is the last song on side 1, and Money, which is the first song on side 2. Those do not flow, but you start with Speak to Me, very, quiet, sort of instrumentally intro. You have Breathe, which is a beautiful song. I mean, it is amazing. That flows into On the Run, which is when you're sober, it is an absolute mind trick to listen to. I cannot imagine what that song sounds like that thing would be terrifying listening to that. I mean, if you've never heard On the Run, go listen to it. It is crazy. That flows into one of probably Pink Floyd's best songs, most well-known songs, beautiful song, Time. I think as soon as that intro comes on, you can hear it. And the flow from On the Run into Time is just amazing. If you don't know, Time starts with sort of I don't even know how to describe it, but it's the song with the clocks in the intro, is the best way I can think of it. That flows directly into The Great Gig in the Sky, which features Claire Torrey. A lot of people love that song, and I can see why. It is a beautiful instrumental. End of side 1, side 2, you have Money, which I think everyone knows and loves Money. It is a wonderful, awesome, crazy song to listen to. Beautiful bass. I love the best bass out of probably any song ever. It is just beautiful. Aside from maybe Let There Be More Light. That song has some good bass too. But that flows directly into Us and Them, which ironically was the other single off of the album, aside from Money. Time is a big radio hit, but, Time and Money are, time is money. But Us and Them, one of my favorite songs on the album. It's amazing. It's quiet, it's beautiful, it's long. That flows directly into Any Color You Like, which if you're not familiar with the album, you might think Any Color You Like is still Us and Them. It's just continued because there's no, with Breathe to On the Run to Time to Great you can tell. I mean, it's continuous. It's a one continuous piece of music, but you can tell when there's break. Breathe and Time both end with like a, they finish off, and then this quietly flows into the next one. Any Color You Like is an instrumental that flows directly, just, great. Then you have Brain Damage, which is an awesome song. It really is the end of the album. I think it's wonderful. If the band you're in starts playing different tunes, we'll see you on the dark side of the moon, something like that. I should see the lyrics here. And of course, finishes off with Eclipse. All that you touch, all that you see, all that you taste, all that you feel, all that. A lot of Syd Barrett references in here. I think anybody with a brain would realize that. There's a lot of Syd Barrett references. So, why on earth would I have this masterpiece, objective masterpiece, so low? Better question I think people are going to have is, why the hell have you put More and, I don't know, freaking The Final Cut above this? Well, here's the reason. And I should preface this by saying this album, if you didn't know that this album came out in 1973, when would you think this came out? I mean, put aside, what modern music sounds like. Listen to the album. It sounds new. It sounds like something that could have come out today. On the Run does, for sure, but the whole album. You gotta think about, in 1973, there was nothing like this. You had, Black Sabbath, you had Led Zeppelin, kind of, you had Grateful Dead, you had bands that were kind of teetering on the edge of, some darker, little bit more heavy songs, more continuous, but this was just broke down every wall, no pun intended, that came a couple years later. This took all of those barriers and all of those precedents and threw them away. And it really did change the music industry in 73. I mean, you gotta imagine in 73, you have heard nothing like this before. I would give anything to go back to be like my age, 1920, in 73, so I could have heard this for the first time and just probably had my head explode, probably listening to it. I mean, I cannot imagine what it was like for people to buy this in 73, especially with Pink Floyd's prior stuff, which we're going to talk about. Put this on and go, what is this? I mean, you want to talk about Van Halen's first record, Eruption, sounding like it's from outer space? This was before that. Not taking anything away from Eruption. Eruption is an amazing, legendary song. But you want to talk about something from outer space? Literally from outer space. And I think one of the important things to realize is that this was not really Pink Floyd's type of music at the time. You got to think about it. You had Piper, totally different. That's Syd Barrett stuff. If you didn't tell someone that, Time and, I don't know, pick a song off of Piper. I don't know, Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk or something. If you didn't tell someone that this was the same band, they wouldn't think it. Are you kidding? The Scarecrow, I mean, even songs like Corporal Clegg, anything off of those early albums, the Nile song, compared to this, it doesn't sound like the same band. It just doesn't. Ummagumma comes around, okay, we've got some slightly longer songs, we're developing longer songs, we're making more experimental stuff. Ummagumma, as much as I talk crap about it, this has some roots going back to Ummagumma. You have to give it. That was where the experimental sound started. You had Atom Heart Mother, which was the first introduction of the super long song, because you had, Interstellar Overdrive, you had Saucerful, you had some of the Ummagumma tracks, Sisyphus and that. You had longer songs, 10 to 15 minutes, but a whole side of a record. Atom Heart Mother comes along and just breaks everything down. The B-side of that, second side, slightly longer songs, 5 minutes. You have Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which we're going to talk about in the Atom Heart Mother video. Longer-ish, 13 minutes. Okay, boom. Next year comes 1971. You have Echoes released. Pink Floyd's, just people say it is their magnum opus album. I mean, they're just, all of it cultivated into that. That came before this. That song Echoes, and even the songs One of These Days, Saint-Tropez, Fearless, all of those songs were gearing them up for this. because you still have lighter, more acoustic songs, you know, like Fearless, Saint-Tropez. You have Seamus. Then you have Echoes, which does sound very, you know, Dark Side like. Same with Atom Heart Mother. They're similar songs. Echoes and Atom Heart Mother are very similar. But okay, then you have Obscured by Clouds, which we're going to talk about in the video for it. You know, shorter. It started as a soundtrack, but shorter. You know, slightly more upbeat. You know, just, you know, kind of lighter songs. And then, boom! Next year after that, you get this. I mean, just the what am I trying to say? The contrast between even Obscured by Clouds, the album before it, even Metal, the difference is just insane. They had never done anything like this before. No one had, but especially Pink Floyd. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, Pink Floyd's always been, you know, Dark Side is just always them, blah, 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 blah. No, it wasn't. Songs off of, like, The Wall, Animals, they're not like this. This is different. And what's interesting is Obscured by Clouds, the year before this, completely different album. You can hardly even tell it's the same band. But I will say, listening to Obscured by Clouds, you can definitely hear where some of this is starting to take shape. You can hear it. Okay, skip a year, now you have Wish You Were Here. Totally different style, goes all the way back to like metal Atom Heart Mother style music. You know, little more electronic, but longer songs, more melodic, you know, less flowiness, I guess you could say. More heavy lyrics. But why don't I like this album? Which is not a statement. I love this album. One of the first albums as a kid I really came to love is, and by the way, I know there's probably some younger people watching. If you want the full Dark Side experience, you have to listen to it on vinyl, because just like The Wall, yes, you can listen to it on YouTube and get ad blocked, but it is not the same as putting the vinyl on and hearing the literal continuation of the songs into one another. So, just saying. But, okay. Let me explain why this is number 11 to me. It may not be totally clear, and I really have to be careful what I give away here, but you're going to see it evolve over the next couple videos. If you couldn't already tell, I, you know, generally, you know, gravitate towards the more older Pink Floyd, the Syd Barrett stuff, you know, somewhat, trying not to hint too much, kind of more towards that, just a little bit over the stuff like Animals, The Wall, you know, Division Bell, the newer stuff, even like songs off of, you know, even songs off of Metal, some of them. I'm more a fan of the older. I think a lot of people, you're probably starting to get that. And this probably confirms it. This album doesn't sound like anything else Pink Floyd ever recorded. And that is amazing, because this album sounds ungodly. It is amazing. But I personally don't prefer this style over the style of, say, even the Syd Barrett stuff, or even the early Roger Waters stuff, the Atom Heart Mother stuff, the Echo stuff, even stuff like The Wall. This is a beautiful, unique style, and you can hear immediately when you're listening to a song off of Dark Side, and that's great. And I can see why people love it, because it is truly beautiful, and it is completely different than anything they had done up until that point, really after that too. But because of that, for me, it's hard to put it any higher because, excuse me, as I've mentioned, I love all Pink Floyd. Every album they made is a masterpiece, even on the Up. But I have a hard time putting this higher than number 11 because with all of the other albums and their unique sounds, I would honestly just rather listen to them. And there's nothing wrong with this. There are times I want to put this album on, you know, and I don't want to listen to any other Pink Floyd besides this. Not often, but it happens. And it's satisfying and beautiful. But for me, it's just not my go-to. And that's why it's so low. You know, even scrolling through the track listing here, Speak to Me and Breathe. Breathe is a beautiful song. Great. On the Run is a freaking mess. I can't imagine. Time, amazing song, one of their best. Great Gig in the Sky, honestly, I could give or take that song. It's okay. Money, again, one of the greats. Us and Them, again, one of the greats. Any Color You Like, meh. Brain Damage and Eclipse, again, beautiful coda ending. I use the word coda right. Beautiful ending, but it's just different for me. And that's why I don't put it that, high up. And I love it. But again, it's just hard for me to put up there. And I think part of the reason why this album is so popular and why it sold so well is the drugs. I mean, let's be honest. Like, it's the drugs. I'm sober. I've never done anything crazy. But even I have a friend who, not to put too much of his business out there, but he's dabbled in some of the harder stuff, certain things. One of the things he's dabbled in is LSD, honestly. I'll just put it out there. And he told me, he's a little older than me. He was my age when he, tried LSD. He told me that he had a vinyl copy of this album, and he listened to it on LSD. I think maybe even some acid to it, different versions of what he was doing at the time. And he told me that it is an absolute just mind, I'm trying not to swear, but mind, F. It is like literally like taking your brain and breaking it. He said it is almost, an overload sensory-wise. Like, he specifically cited the intro to Time, when you're on, stuff and everything you're listening to is amplified and makes it, everything you hear is just bigger, better. The intro to Time with all of the clicking and the clocks and the noises is like ear candy to that effect on the brain. And I can see that. Even the solo to Money, for that matter, is like that. And I think, that's why this album partly gets so much recognition. And, maybe one day if I dabble in the hard stuff, we'll, never say never. I don't plan to. I've never even smoked marijuana, honest to God. On my dead dog's life, I have never smoked marijuana, and if I did, it would be listening to this album, honestly. I'm not going to put on, the first time I smoked marijuana, I'm not listening to the Final Cut. Let's just put it that way, But, yeah. What a great album. What an amazing album. Probably a very controversial pick because everyone loves this album. And really, this is, I think, objectively Pink Floyd's best work. I think anyone will tell you that objectively it is their best. And it really is. It's just so different. I think that if they, and I think Roger Waters has said it before too, if they had come out with this album and stopped, they would have forever written their name in history, even with just 6, 7, 8 albums. Granted, did this catapult them into the spotlight? Yes. And I do think that even though I mentioned in the Animals video that Animals is what started to split them apart, the success of this album being thrust into the spotlight so fast and so hard, I think started to contribute to it. And I mean, honestly, if you think about it too, another interesting statistic is, touched the vinyl by accident. Another interesting statistic is, think about Pink Floyd's first album, The Piper. Came out in 68. 67, sorry. 68, Saucerful is out. 69, you have More and Ummagumma, it's a double hitter. 70, you have Atom Heart Mother. 71, you have Metal. 72, you have Obscured by Clouds. 73, you have Dark Side. So we're continuously releasing albums here consecutively every year, sometimes twice a year. We skip 74. I know maybe there was some, other stuff, but studio album-wise, we skip 74, and we go to 75, Wish You Were Here. This, out of 8 albums, was the first one to break that mold of every year. And why? I'm not really sure. But if I had to guess, you thrust an album. I mean, this album is one of the best-selling albums of all time. It stayed in the Billboard Hot 100 for like 600 weeks or something crazy. Longer than that, almost 900. I have to imagine if I was, David or Roger or Nick or Rick, the effect I would almost feel like I'd release the album and I'd be like, oh, well, that sold 30 million copies. Well, what's next? Sort of a moment where you're reeling and you hit sort of like a spot where you're like, we just did that. What do we do now? I mean, you follow it up, obviously, which is why we have Wish You Were Here. But there was a year in between there where it's like, and I can see why. It's like you release this and it's like, well, we just released the biggest album of all time. I mean, how do we top it? And you don't. That's why they never did. So, I don't think I have much else to say. This video is probably going to be the longest out of any of them. But, well, maybe number 1, number 2, number 3 will be longer. So, which, once we get into the top 5, I'll talk about it more. But, you know, so, in conclusion, Dark Side of the Moon, beautiful album, wonderful, amazing, ungodly to listen to. Just, it's spine tingling, I think is a good word. It will tingle your spine. Might tingle your, you know, something else too if you're on enough drugs. I'm joking. But, you know, it is an ear tickler. That is what this album is. It is a brain and ear. It's your brain getting funny is what we'll say. Especially based on the friend I said who did LSD, where you feel like almost giggly listening to the album, which I'm sure is a great feeling. But anyway, The Dark Side of the Moon, ladies and gentlemen, Pink Floyd's, you know, basically best album, people say. Why I have it at number 11, why I don't think it's their best. I mean, it is amazing, but like I said, you know, personally, I think a couple other albums did it better. I think that the next video is going to be people saying you are insane and ridiculous for putting that album above Dark Side. Well, I think people are already saying, what the hell, where's the Final Cut and more? Those should have been dead last. But whatever, we'll talk about them. So, in conclusion, Dark Side of the Moon, number 11. This is the 5th episode. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, and look forward to the next. Bye-bye.